So I'm going to be building a new front end for the Tundra bumper and redoing the grill and everything. So I thought I'd go ahead and document the process. I just do it by feel and kind of figure it out as I go. Cut the frame rails very, very, very tight to the body and in that angle because I want to keep this thing as low profile as possible. See there, just barely at the edge of the radiator shroud now. But just like last time I built the bumper, I'm going to build everything off these bottom plates. They bolt between the tow hooks and the frame, squeezed in place by the factory mounting bolts. Okay, so step 2, I put on the front plates. I decided to angle them pretty high up. All right, I'm going to do the outer plate on the frame. All right, got a matching set of these made. These are going to wrap around the outside of the frame. All right, I've got that outer plate tacked in place here. Because I hate being wasteful, I'm going to take the 2 leftover pieces from making the outside frame rail pieces. I'm going to cut those down and extend them and use them as the inside frame rail pieces. So you can see what I've done here is made some extensions for these pieces. I'm going to do a very small gap. I beveled both these edges to make sure it's nice and strong between there. So I welded these together, ground them down, so they're basically just one piece of metal now. I had to pull these off the truck to get them tacked up and ready to go. Okay, so I've got the basic structure here. Next, I'm going to make a little strap. It makes it easier to kind of slide these over the rails, have something to hold them in place. That way I can let go of the bumper and get under here and hit the bolts. So I got the cross strap welded across the top. Been trying to work out of the rain, so I kind of forgot to film some stuff. I've established the approach angle. This is going to be the main body of the bumper here. I'm going to build some plates to fit right in here to reinforce this main part. So I've transferred my design to some old leftover 3/16 plate. Got my 2 filler pieces cut out. So I got those pieces tacked in, and what I think I'm gonna do here is there's a little gap. I think I'm gonna build a little teeny filler piece just so that when I weld all this together and smooth it out, it looks like one nice continuous piece. All right, made these little gap fillers. They're gonna fit in here like so. So I got this piece of flat bar that I found. I'm gonna take this and put it here just to add a little bit more width to this center section and a little bit more structure. Okay, got that cross piece in there. So the next step is going to be I need to build the inside plates to reinforce this inside area. Got the 2 inside brackets cut out. These are going to go right here. So I got these welded in. The next step we're going to do is to cap this piece right here to make it solid. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and stitch weld the inside of the bumper just to get things solid, because I'm not going to be able to reach it once I put those caps on. So I got the bumper all stitch welded up on the inside. I got those caps cut out and tacked into place. So after a lot of welding and grinding and more welding and more grinding, sanding, I got the bumper looking like one continuous piece of metal. The next step is going to be get it mounted up and start constructing the wings. A little more work here. Got the risers tacked in place. These are what the wings are going to be basically built off of and supported by. So from here I'm going to start designing the wings. So this is kind of where I'm at. Wrap around to the wheel well here. But I think for the main body, that's going to be pretty good. But I'm kind of liking that. For anyone wondering what I'm doing, taking the cardboard pieces I make, tracing them out on the metal and cutting them out. Nothing fancy here. Pretty common knowledge, but anyone that is watching this that's not into fabricating stuff, if you're hand cutting things, odds are they're not going to be exactly the same if you're cutting 2 pieces. So if you want to get 2 pieces exactly the same, this is what I do. I just clamp them together. Clean up one edge. I usually try to use the longest edge. Run your flapper along this edge until it looks like one continuous piece of metal. Do the exact same thing around all the other edges. You'll end up with 2 pieces of metal almost exactly the same. Hope that helps. Gonna keep working. So I tested and came up with the angles I like, and I'm using the clamps again to get exact matches in the angle. Weld in each of these creases, which will hold the ankle. I got the wings on here. Next piece I'm going to build is the piece that goes on top here. All right, got the top plates in place. All right, I've got the main support for the wings done, and those are going to support the wing so it has a rigidity and doesn't just flop around. All right, the next piece on the turn, I found easy way to do this is just cut a piece that's about the same size as the piece you're trying to support, line it up with the edge of the metal all the way to where it's going to make its next turn, and then it's going to overlap. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to go right down that line so I know the exact angle I need to cut this at. This is what I end up with. Okay, so I got that cut out, and I wish I could do fabrication stuff every day. By the end of my project, I'm always getting really good at cutting stuff. I just cut these both freehand. Didn't even have to grind to make them match. You know, whatever. I'll take a win when I can get it. All right, so I got the final support piece in place, and I'm going to do a little end cap. I'm just going to take a piece of cardboard, fold it over flat here, and then I'm just going to trace along that line right there to get my end cap. So I got the end cap piece made, and you can see it's going to need a slight bend in it, and I'll relief cut that little end piece. All right, so you can see I got this little end cap made. All right, so I finished welded the inside. Just wanted to add some structure in the areas where the metal comes together, and then sort of stitch weld all the long flat areas. And now I'm going to go along the outside, completely weld up all the seams. Making some progress. I already welded up the top half, ground it down to a nice edge. Overall, it's looking pretty good, nice clean edge. Now I just welded up the bottom half. Go ahead and get started on grinding all those all the way down. After a lot of grinding, got everything smoothed out. I'm going to take this light. I'm going to go along and just find any larger imperfections, hit them with some welds. So I'll just hit anything that casts a shadow one more time. Found all my little boo-boos, put a little weld in each of them, and grind those again, get it nice and smooth. Got a piece of 3/16. I measured the distance underneath the radiator. I've plotted that out on this piece of steel. I took equal amounts out each end, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to score all these lines on each end and fold this up. All right, so I went ahead and scored the metal. So I found the angle I liked, put a couple tack welds in there. I test fit it, and I don't like how there is a transition here into a straight line. It just doesn't flow well. I don't want like a straight wall right here because that just is going to hang up on things. So what I'm going to try to do is to match this angle here with the front of the skid plate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off these end pieces, and I'm going to cut an angle into these end pieces, and I'm actually going to move them forward so the edge of them is here at the edge of the plate. All right, got those pieces cut out and angled. They're going to match angle here for they're basically like this. So it was an abrupt wall. So now that's going to flow with the bumper. Got the angle pieces cut, got the skid plate tacked into place. I like this angle a lot better. And I got this piece of flat strap to add rigidity to this crossbar and also to protect the radiator from the front side. So this is how it works. It still has plenty of room for recovery points. It protects the front bottom of the radiator. It goes underneath. Protects the bottom of the radiator and the hoses. I put a little drain hole in the middle. It doesn't detract from the looks of the bumper overall. All right, I went ahead and fully welded the outside and ground it down smooth. I decided not to grind down the welds that where it attaches to the bottom plate, only because that's probably going to be the part with the most stress on it. I also fully welded the inside instead of stitch welding it, just because I want it to be as rigid as possible. That skid plate added quite a bit of weight to the bumper. I'm about to hang it up and see what it weighs now. All right, so we got it hung up. We're right at 47.4 pounds, which is great. I was shooting for under 50. All right, well, I got working and I can't remember where I left off. This is where I'm at with the bumper. Added some speed holes just because it just broke up that big flat surface. My next step is I'm going to add a third mounting point. I've got the two mounting points here. I'm going to use these old caliper bolts because they're the same head size as the mounting bolts for underneath. They're 17 millimeter, same bolt size, same thread, and these are caliper bolts, so they are designed to have a good shear strength, good side load shear strength. I'm going to set it up similar to the factory mounts. You can see that there's nuts welded inside the frame there, and do the same thing for a mount here on the side. So right now I'm just drilling out the side through the side of the bumper and through the frame rail. These are the bolts I'm going to use. You can see the shank should be just about perfect for covering where the shear is going to be on these. The threads do not go far enough up to space this out. So what I'm going to do is I found these old nuts that are a little bit bigger diameter than the ones I'm using. I'm going to use these as a spacer. That way, when I weld this inside frame here, it's going to space this capture nut out where it's going to get full thread engagement. So I got the nuts all cleaned up. I don't have a welding table, so this little piece of 2x4 is going to be my improvised welding table. got those tacked together. You can see the capture nut, it'll go straight through there. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt that in place and then tack it in. I used this washer to simulate the thickness of the bumper, nice and flush against the inside of the frame rail. You can see there's full thread engagement. I got 1 or 2 threads outside the nut, and I'm going to go ahead and weld this to the inside of the frame and make it permanent. Those are the 2 capture nuts for the bottom mount. That's where the majority of the stress is going to be. You see the frame is double walled there. That's the recovery point. That's the only stress is going to be on that point. It's not going to be on the bumper itself. Real important to remember. Then a 3rd point here, just to give it some horizontal stability. And then between those 3 points and the fact that it squeezes itself around frame rail, holds itself in place, that should be plenty strong. All right, so I don't own a metal brake. This is what I did to kind of do a makeshift metal brake. I took a piece of angle iron, clamped it to the table, grabbed on the end with a piece of metal over here so I could pull the whole thing at the same time. That's how I'm putting the bends in this expanded steel. This is going to fit like this. This is the back of the bumper. This is going to be the protection from stuff. If I'm driving through brush or something, it's not going to shoot a hole right through the radiator with a stick or something. All right, I got the mesh all welded in all the way around, so it's super solid. All right, I got it mounted up. I'm working on now the lights up front. We're doing 4 7-inchers. Got most of the lights mounted up, at least the ones that are going to mount to the bumper. I got the 2 amber driving lights and 2 clear spots. My intention is probably to add some fogs underneath here at some point, some small fog lights. All right, this is the final version. Mounted up, got the lights on, our light covers on. I just wanted to go over a few things that I changed on this version versus the last one. The main thing that I wanted to do was to make these recovery points more accessible if the front end was buried or in the ground or whatever, and allow the rope or the shackle or whatever is hooked to it to have a little bit more freedom of movement. So what I did is instead of bringing these outwards and up, I brought them inwards and down. So that just really provides very, very clear access to these. That was one of the things I didn't like about the old bumper. So, and then I did, here you can see I made the arms further out from the edge. Last one I had them in very, very tight, and it looked nice, but unfortunately if I ran into something, brush or whatever, it would tend to hit the body before it was pushed away from the truck by the force of the bumper. So I just made these maybe 1 inch wider right here on the corners. That was the only spot that I had an issue with on the old bumper. And then overall, weight wise, this bumper is under 50 pounds total. The last bumper was, I believe it was right around 88 pounds, 90 pounds, somewhere around there, which is still light, but this is incredibly light. So the way I accomplished that was on the last bumper, I did the main body out of 1/4 inch plate and the wings out of 3/16. On this, I did the main body out of 3/16, which is basically the skid plate, these pieces that come up here and the center crossing, and then the rest is all 1/8 plate. And it should be plenty rigid enough for what I'm doing. I don't intend on smashing into things with this bumper. This bumper is designed, if it gets into a major accident, these wings will collapse, just like the stock design. That's how I prefer it. I'd rather the wings collapse than it crush my frame and cause the frame to bend. So those are the major component changes. I have switched to 7-inch lights here on the bumper instead of the 4-inch ones that were on the last one. I have 2 amber driving lights and 2 white spotlights. That should provide plenty of light for the trails. What I'm planning on doing is mounting a fog light under here somewhere, maybe on these mounts or whatever, just for street driving, a DOT approved fog light. Because the bumper is so tight to the body here, I am going to have to make a custom grill, which I intended on doing anyway, because the stock grill will not fit over these unless I cut them or cut it, which I could do. I may end up doing, we'll see. But I think I'm going to come up with something for this area that's kind of similar to what I did down here, so it all sort of flows together. But overall, pretty happy with the bumper. It looks how I wanted it to look. It should function how I want it to function. It's nice and lightweight. See a profile. See, it's very, very high angle, very high approach angle. It barely sticks out past the front of the truck. So if you're anything like me and you just can't find stuff in the aftermarket that looks the way you like, I guess you just build it. These old trucks, that's what you do.